I'm Natalie Whitman. I'm 30. And 3 weeks ago, I stood on the porch of the only home I'd ever known with my key in my hand. Useless. I had just driven back to Charleston after what felt like my first breath of hope in months. A design job interview that went better than I could have dreamed. I parked in the driveway, the red brick colonial glowing in the soft afternoon light. It looked the same. Too much the same. I remember thinking that. But when I tried the front door, the lock didn't budge. At first, I thought maybe I was just tired. I tried again. Harder. Nothing. I moved to the side door, the one we'd used since I was in grade school. Same thing. My pulse began to race. I called my sister, Veronica. It rang once and went straight to voicemail. Then my phone buzzed with a text. From her. "You're not welcome here anymore. Don't come back." I froze. Read it twice. My chest tightened like someone had knocked the wind out of me. I called again. Her, my mom, my dad. Nothing. Voicemail. Silence. I tried knocking. Pounding. I shouted her name like a lunatic. Still nothing. Through the frosted window, I thought I saw movement in the hallway, but no one answered. No one came. So I sat there on the front steps of my childhood home, in my best blazer and heels, holding a portfolio of dreams, completely shut out. I didn't have a backup plan. I'd only left the house for the night to cool off after a brutal argument with Veronica. I thought I'd be back home by dinner. Instead, I found myself Googling nearby motels on 2% battery. That night, I lay on a stained mattress in a roadside room with flickering lights and cried into a thin pillow that wasn't mine. I stared at the cracked ceiling and thought, is this how it ends? Not with a scream. Not even a goodbye. Just a lock. A text. And nothing. If you've ever been erased by your own family, if the people who raised you suddenly turned their backs, you know what that moment feels like. You question your worth. You question your past. You question everything. But this isn't the end of the story because 2 days later, I got an email that changed everything. Subject: The Eleanor Whitman Architectural Trust. Urgent. And that's when I realized Veronica may have locked me out, but she didn't know what Grandma had left behind. Growing up in Charleston, South Carolina, our home stood like a postcard, the kind tourists slowed down to photograph. 3 floors, ivy on brick, wrought iron balcony. But inside, it wasn't a storybook. It was a stage, and my role was always the understudy. Veronica, my sister, 6 years older, was the family's shining star. She took after Dad, sharp, pragmatic, driven. By 18, she already had a summer internship at Whitman Development, the construction firm our family had run for 3 generations. Me? I was the one with ink stains on my fingers and paintbrushes in my backpack. I wanted to be an interior architect, like our late grandmother, Eleanor Whitman, the woman who designed half of downtown Charleston's iconic homes. She was my safe place. While my parents praised Veronica's business mind, Eleanor would sit beside me in her sunroom and flip through color palettes and floor plans. "Design," she once whispered, "isn't just style, Natalie. It's freedom." After she died, everything changed. Veronica slid right into Eleanor's space. Her desk, her files, even her voice. My parents, Miriam and Daniel Whitman, welcomed the transition like it was inevitable. "She's ready to lead," my mother would beam. Meanwhile, I was invisible. I scraped through design school, working 3 jobs and survived on scholarships and midnight ramen. I emailed Mom and Dad for help once. Just once. And got a 3-word reply. "Toughen up, Nat." Still, I kept going. I started a small design blog, picked up freelance clients, even landed a few features. But last year, my contract with the downtown boutique studio dried up. I stretched every dollar, maxed every credit card. Then, out of options, I called home. Veronica didn't hide her disapproval. "You're 30, not 13, she said, lips tight over the phone. "This isn't a crash pad." But Dad finally muttered, "It's temporary." So they let me back in, with conditions. Rent, chores, curfew, Veronica's rules. I tried to make it work. I cooked dinner, I cleaned. I even helped stage 2 of their new properties, for free. But no matter what I did, I was the charity case. One night, I proposed an idea to modernize their outdated client spaces. New color schemes, flexible layouts, sustainable design. Veronica rolled her eyes mid-sentence. "You're not even licensed," she said, her voice thick with condescension. "Why don't you stick to rearranging your Pinterest boards?" Mom chuckled behind her wine glass. Dad stayed quiet, as always. That was the night we exploded. I told her she was a tyrant, that she'd always resented Grandma Eleanor's attention toward me. She fired back with venom. "You're a leech, Natalie. Grandma was wrong about you." That line, "Grandma was wrong," sliced deeper than anything she'd ever said. I grabbed my bag, stormed out, and told myself I just needed one night to breathe, one night to cool off. I didn't know it then, but that night would cost me everything. The morning after our fight, I woke up in a stiff motel bed with faded floral curtains and a buzzing air conditioner that never shut off. I had an interview that day, a junior interior designer position with a boutique firm near King Street. It wasn't ideal, but it was a lifeline. I ironed my blouse on a motel nightstand, practiced my pitch in the mirror, and sent Veronica a message before I left. "Back tonight. Let's talk." I stared at the screen. No reply. The interview went better than I dared to hope. The creative director loved my portfolio, even called my sketches bold with warmth. I left their office walking taller than I had in months. For the first time in weeks, I felt possibility. I drove back to the house around 4:30 p.m., rehearsing what I'd say to Veronica. Maybe we'd both gone too far. Maybe we could cool off, renegotiate peace. But when I pulled into the driveway, something felt off. The lawn was manicured, the lights were on, the flower boxes freshly watered. Too perfect. I walked to the front door, pulled out my key, and slid it into the lock. It didn't turn. I frowned and tried again, jiggling it, but it stuck. My chest tightened. I tried the side door. Nothing. The back door. Same. Each lock. Replaced. Hands trembling, I pulled out my phone and called Veronica. Voicemail. Then came the notification. A new text. From her. "You're not welcome here anymore. Don't come back. Your stuff's boxed. Pick it up Saturday before 5. We won't be home." I read it once, twice. My vision blurred. She meant it. She'd locked me out. Changed the locks while I was at an interview. Not a word. Not a warning. I collapsed onto the porch steps, heart pounding like it might punch a hole through my ribs. The porch light flicked on automatically as the sun dipped. I sat there, staring at the front door I'd walked through, for most of my life, now a stranger. My hands shook as I dialed my mom. Straight to voicemail. Dad, same. In desperation, I called my cousin Leo in Savannah. "Something's wrong," I said as soon as he answered. "I can't get into the house. The locks are different. They're ignoring me." There was a long pause. "Natalie, check your texts," he said gently. I did. And there it was. That message. The line that gutted me. "You're not welcome here anymore." I barely remembered hanging up. I drove back to the motel on autopilot, my body there, but my mind 1,000 miles away. I lay on that creaky bed again, staring at the ceiling, too angry to cry, too stunned to sleep. I reached for comfort, maybe distraction, and opened Instagram. And there she was, Veronica, smiling with Mom and Dad at the kitchen island, champagne flutes raised. The caption read, "Family night, nothing better." And just like that, I knew. They had erased me. I didn't sleep that night. I lay wide awake in that dim motel room, the mattress too thin and the silence too loud. My phone had died hours earlier. I'd forgotten my charger at the house along with everything else. My sketchbooks, my laptop, my grandmother's sewing shears, even my passport. Gone. Or rather, trapped behind locks I could no longer open. By morning, I was running on caffeine and fumes. I borrowed a charger from the front desk and powered up my phone, bracing for silence. But there it was. An unread email with the subject line, "Eleanor Whitman, Architectural Trust, urgent. Sender, Marcus Hendricks, Esquire, Hendricks and Lowell Law Offices." At first, I thought it was spam, or a cruel trick. But something in me, a flicker of hope I hadn't felt in days, clicked the message open. It was real. The email was formal but personal. Marcus Hendricks stated that he represented the trust established by my grandmother, Eleanor Whitman, prior to her death. He asked me to schedule a meeting regarding matters relevant to your beneficiary status and current residence rights under the trust. I blinked. Beneficiary? Residence rights? I barely finished reading before calling the number at the bottom. He answered on the second ring. Miss Whitman, thank you for getting back to us, he said, calm and clear. I understand you're in a very distressing situation. Please come in, today if possible. I was already grabbing my bag. By noon, I stood in front of a modern glass office building in downtown Charleston, the kind of place that made my wrinkled clothes feel louder than they were. I walked through the marble lobby, stomach in knots, heart pounding. The receptionist greeted me kindly and ushered me into a sleek conference room overlooking the harbor. Minutes later, a tall man in a navy suit entered, briefcase in hand. I'm Marcus Hendricks, he said. I believe your grandmother left you more than anyone realized. He opened a thick file and slid a set of papers toward me. The home you were locked out of? It doesn't belong to your sister or your parents. It belongs to the Eleanor Whitman Trust. Your grandmother created it to protect her most cherished asset, you. I stared at him, unsure if I'd heard right. She ensured, he continued, that you would always have the legal right to reside in that home. That no trustee, no matter their title or ego, could deny you shelter. And that's not all. He pulled out another folder. Your grandmother also allocated a significant creative fund to support your career in design. And according to our records, you've never been informed it existed. My breath caught. Veronica hadn't just locked me out. She'd kept a fortune from me, a legacy. But Grandma Eleanor had known, and she had planned for this. Back at the motel, I sat at the edge of the bed with Marcus's flash drive plugged into my laptop. My backup laptop, the one I barely used anymore. I opened the folder labeled Trust Documents and scanned through files dense with legal language, numbers, and signatures. But what stopped me cold was the file titled simply, For Natalie, Personal Letter. I clicked, and there it was, Grandma Eleanor's handwriting scanned in her signature fountain pen blue. My dearest Natalie, if you are reading this, then I'm no longer with you, and something has gone terribly wrong. You were never a burden, never a disappointment. You were a light I feared your parents and sister would try to snuff out after I was gone. This trust is not just legal protection. It's a key to your future. The house is yours to call home, whenever you need it. And the fund is for your designs. Use it to build, to heal, to create the life they tried to bury. And know this, no matter what they say, I always believed in you. Love always, Grandma Eleanor. Tears streamed down my face. She knew. She had seen it. All of it. Veronica's coldness, my parents' silence, the way I was always treated like the family stray. She hadn't just left money. She'd left armor. I called Leo again, needing to hear a voice that wasn't judging or calculating. He answered instantly. She really did all that for you? He said, after I explained what the letter revealed. She always talked about how much you reminded her of herself, Leo continued. She said Veronica only ever wanted her power. But you had her vision. My chest ached, but this time it wasn't from grief. It was something else. Resolve. I'd spent my whole life playing defense, begging to be seen, shrinking to fit, but Grandma hadn't built this trust to keep me small. She built it so I could stand. That night I barely slept. Not because I was spiraling, but because I was planning. By morning, I had already drafted a proposal with Marcus. We scheduled a formal meeting with the trustees, my sister and my parents. Marcus would lead the discussion. This time, he said, you walk in with the law on your side. Still, I couldn't help the knot in my stomach, facing Veronica again, looking my mother in the eye, knowing they'd lied, stolen, locked me out. But I wasn't the girl on the porch anymore. I was Eleanor Whitman's granddaughter, and I was done being quiet. Tuesday morning, I walked into the conference room at Hendricks and Lowell, dressed in my best thrifted blazer and secondhand heels, head high, palms sweating. My heart thundered, but I forced each step forward like it mattered. Because it did. Marcus stood at the far end of the table, already reviewing documents. Beside him was a financial advisor from the trust and an associate named Janelle, quietly taking notes. On the table sat thick manila folders, evidence of everything they'd done. At exactly 10 a.m., the door opened. Veronica walked in first, tailored suit sharp enough to cut, chin lifted like she owned the sky. Behind her were my parents, Miriam clutching her designer purse like a lifeline, and Dad, Daniel, blank-faced, distant as ever. Their attorney, a woman named Celeste Granger, someone who had once been Eleanor's friend, trailed behind them with a tight-lipped smile. Then came Leo, my cousin, my anchor. He slid into the chair beside me, offering nothing more than a nod, but it was enough. "Let's begin," Marcus said, his voice crisp, professional. "We're here to discuss the breaches of the Eleanor Whitman Architectural Trust." He handed out packets as everyone settled. "The primary violations," he continued, "include unlawful denial of residents' access to the named beneficiary, Miss Natalie Whitman, and the unauthorized use of $140,000 from the designated creative fund for personal property renovations." Veronica scoffed. "That money improved the house. Natalie benefited from it while she lived there." I leaned forward. "I didn't benefit from a master suite remodel or imported marble counters I never touched. That wasn't your money. It was mine. It was for my work, my career, not your vanity projects." Celeste jumped in, calm and clipped. "We believe this was a misunderstanding. There was no malicious intent." Marcus didn't flinch. "Intent is irrelevant when fiduciary responsibility is breached. This is theft under trust law." Then came the spreadsheet. Every transaction, every renovation invoice, every cent drained from the account meant to support my future. And finally, Marcus pulled out the scanned letter. Grandma Eleanor's voice, in ink for everyone to see. "Natalie was always the visionary, the dreamer. I created this trust to protect her in ways I may not be able to when I'm gone. Should she ever be locked out, silenced, or erased, I want her to know the house is hers as long as she needs it. The fund is hers to create a life far beyond this one." My mother's lip trembled. My father stared at the floor. Veronica's jaw clenched, but she stayed silent. Leo spoke next. Calm, clear. "Grandma told me what she feared, that you, Veronica, would try to erase Natalie just like you tried to erase Eleanor's vision." Celeste whispered something to Veronica. Her eyes narrowed. "What exactly do you want, Natalie?" I looked around the room, at the people who once made me feel small, and let the silence speak for a moment. Then I said, "I want out. I want a home of my own, paid for by the fund you misused. I want an independent trustee to watch every cent from now on. And I want no more contact, no manipulation, no guilt. You go your way, I go mine." Celeste shifted uncomfortably. "And if we decline?" Marcus replied without missing a beat. "Then we file for removal of all current trustees, demand restitution, and initiate court proceedings." The room was still, tense. Veronica's expression cracked for a moment. Not fear, not shame, just the first flicker of loss. And for once, I didn't flinch. 48 hours later, Marcus called. "They signed everything," he said. And I could hear the shift in his voice, the weight lifted. "The condo, the oversight, the separation agreement, it's done, Natalie. You're free." I didn't say anything at first. I just breathed. For the first time in what felt like forever. 2 weeks later, I stood at the threshold of a modest one-bedroom condo in Charleston's French Quarter. It wasn't grand. No marble, no dramatic staircase. But the sunlight poured in through wide windows, and the walls were mine to paint, to fill, to transform. The trust had handled the purchase in full, plus a monthly stipend to help while I rebuilt. Leo helped me move in. He drove down from Savannah with a truck full of boxes. My sketchbooks, Eleanor's sewing box, and a battered suitcase filled with fabric I thought I'd never see again. Veronica hadn't shown. Of course not. She'd left the key with a neighbor and a stiff note taped to one of the boxes. Best of luck. No apology. No acknowledgement. I didn't care. What hurt more was the silence from my parents. No calls, no texts, not even a note. The last thing my mother said was, "We didn't mean for this." But they did. They chose silence when I begged for love. They chose comfort over courage. They let her lock me out. They let her... As Leo helped me carry the last box into my tiny new kitchen, he paused, holding something wrapped in Eleanor's favorite shawl. Inside was her original sketch of the Whitman house, framed, signed, and personalized in pencil. For Natalie. So you'll always remember the bones of a home are yours to build. My throat tightened. That night, I sat on the floor in my living room, surrounded by chaos and cardboard, and opened my sketchbook. I hadn't touched it in weeks, not since that night I stormed out. I drew for hours, not for a client, not for approval, but for myself. I designed soft walls and light, a space that breathed, a space that healed. This wasn't just a new home, it was a beginning. Later that week, I started therapy with Dr. Erin Caldwell, a warm, observant woman who didn't flinch when I told her what happened. "You're not rebuilding what they broke," she said gently. "You're building something that never existed, your life on your terms." And that somehow was more powerful than any apology I'd never get. 6 months after the settlement, my life didn't look anything like it used to, and thank God for that. My mornings started with sunlight through linen curtains and strong coffee in my tiny, perfect kitchen. I turned Eleanor's old sewing nook into a corner studio, walls lined with corkboards, swatches pinned in color gradients, sketches taped like constellations. The brand I had only dreamed about in college now had a name: Found Line Interiors. It was more than a design studio. It was a promise to never shrink again, to never beg for room at someone else's table, to build my own. The monthly stipend from the trust gave me breathing room, and I used it wisely, applying to an interior design accelerator, meeting with mentors, pitching projects with more confidence than I thought I had. To my surprise, people listened. A boutique wellness cafe in Mount Pleasant hired me to redesign their entire space. They said they wanted a place that felt like exhale. And for the first time, I knew exactly what that felt like. Then, one morning, an email pinged into my inbox, an invitation to showcase Found Line Interiors at the Southeast Design Expo. The kind of event I used to watch on Instagram with envy. I stared at the screen for a long time before whispering, "You'd love this, Grandma." And I think she would have. I printed the invitation and pinned it next to her old blueprint. Her handwriting stared back at me. "For Natalie, build what they can't see." Leo visited often. We'd eat takeout on the floor like kids, laugh about our dysfunctional family tree, and dream up what's next. I heard from Mom only once, a short email that read, "I hope you're doing well." I didn't answer. Maybe one day I will. Maybe not. Veronica never reached out. According to Leo, she hated the oversight placed on the trust, said it made her feel powerless. Good. I don't wish her harm. I just finally stopped wishing for her love, because love doesn't lock you out. Love doesn't erase you. And family? Family is who shows up when the locks change, who drives hours to carry boxes, who believes you without question. Family was Leo, Dr. Caldwell, Grandma Eleanor, and now, me. This morning, I stood by the window of my condo, holding a finished sketch for a women's shelter downtown, a redesign project I'd pitched and won. And as I slid it into my portfolio, I smiled, not because I'd won revenge, but because I'd reclaimed my future. Grandma gave me the blueprints, but I built the life.